So we're carrying on with our course overview. After wireless LANs, we will talk about IP routing, the heart and soul of the CCENT course, in my opinion. We'll talk about router basics and configuration, how to console into a router, how to do basic first-time configuration, and what all the different options mean. We'll discuss routing protocols, the various types of routing protocols, distance vector and link state routing protocols. And then we'll move on to the evils of static routing. I'll show you how static routes work, why on a large network they should be destroyed with fire, in my opinion. And then, of course, I'll explain why I believe that static routes don't really have a place in a large enterprise network, if at all avoidable. We'll then talk about RIP, or the Router Information Protocol. Now, RIP is a very basic routing protocol, and it's supported by nearly every device out there. It's one of the easiest to set up and configure and verify, and so that's why they cover it in the CCENT, just to kind of get your feet wet with routing protocols so you know what's coming as you progress further down the certification trail. We'll then talk about wide area networking. We won't talk a whole lot about the nuts and bolts of how to configure wide area networking other than to talk about the types of WANs and to talk about internet connections. We'll then spend a little time about the various types of point-to-point connections, the encapsulation, and how to configure them. It's very easy to configure a point-to-point connection. And then we'll touch on frame relay, and frame relay can be a little more difficult to configure than point-to-point connections. We won't configure them in this course, but if you follow on with the ICND2 course, that's where we get more in-depth with frame relay. We configure up a frame relay network and look at the various types of frame relay networks. But again, that's the next course and not this one. We then move on to in-depth Cisco device maintenance. We talk about the Cisco Secure Device Manager. And as I'll point out when we talk about the SDM, as of the time of this video's recording, is about 4 years old, and it takes a special dedication, if you will, to get this SDM working on modern software and hardware. The SDM has actually been superseded, but because it is in the CCENT course, we have to cover it, and so you'll see how it works and how to do basic configurations in the Cisco Secure Device Manager. We'll configure NAT and DHCP using the Secure Device Manager. We'll talk about file system management, how you can manage the files on the router, the flash, and the config. We'll also talk about TFTP and how it can play a role in maintaining your routers and your router configurations, and helping you back up the configurations on your router in case it gets destroyed by a particularly irritated user with a baseball bat. You can put it back exactly as it was before he took a bat to it. We'll then talk about password recovery, because everybody forgets a password now and then. That's why we have password recovery on nearly every website we visit. And we'll also talk about boot management, or how to tell the router what flash file system to boot off of. We'll then move on and talk about CDP, or the Cisco Discovery Protocol. We'll discuss what it is and how it works and how it can help you build a mental map of your network, and how for some types of networking it's pretty much required. We'll then move on to the lab. Everybody loves the lab. In this lab, we will meet Joe and Joe's widgets, and we'll build a network for him. We'll set up DHCP and NAT and static routing and routing protocols and the whole 9 yards. Everything we've covered in the course will be configured in the lab in pretty much real time. Once we're done building the small network, we'll verify that it actually works like we expect it to. We'll break the network and see that the network actually fails in the manner that we expect it to. The case of this small network, it doesn't actually fail. It's pretty robust, but it performs exactly as we'd expect it to, because that's how we've configured it. And that's it. That's the course overview. That's what we're going to learn over the next few hours. Strap in. It's going to be a fun ride.